Hear now a reading from the book of Acts. We'll be reading from chapter 9, verses 32 through 43. And as I read these words, I invite you to listen for a good word from the Lord. Now as Peter went here and there among all the believers, he came to the town, down, and also to the saints living in Lydda. There he found a man named Aeneas, who had been bedridden for 8 years, for he was paralyzed. Peter said to him, "Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you. Get up and make your bed." And immediately he got up, and all the residents of Lydda and Sharon saw him and turned to the Lord. Now in Joppa there was a disciple whose name was Tabitha, which in Greek is Dorcas. She was devoted to good works and acts of charity. At the time she became ill and died. When they had washed her, they laid her in a room upstairs. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples who heard that Peter was there sent 2 men to him with the request, "Please come to us without delay." So Peter got up and went with them. And when he arrived, they took him to the room upstairs. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was still with them. Peter put all of them outside, and then he knelt down and prayed. He turned to the body and said, "Tabitha, get up." Then she opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He gave her his hand and helped her up. Then calling the saints and widows, he showed her to be alive. This became known throughout Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. Meanwhile, he stayed in Joppa for some time with a certain Simon, a tanner. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I don't know when it was for you the last time that you went to an art museum. But if you go there, you will likely see not only the great works of the great masters, you'll also see many tourists there gathering around trying to see all of these pieces for themselves, things they've just read about or seen in the internet that they just want to behold themselves. But not only that, you'll likely also see someone maybe sitting on a bench or sitting off in the corner, and they'll usually have a sketch pad in their hands. And they'll be diligently drawing away, looking at the masterpiece, but not in the same way that everyone else is. They're trying to not only observe it and take it in, but on the paper they're trying to recreate it. They're trying to take the different strokes of the master and incorporate it into their own drawing. They're imitating what they see there. And it seems to be that the true artists who are able to take those things that they learn as they're trying to recreate the works of the masters who have come before them, it's not only that they're trying to learn the strokes with their hand, but certainly they have to learn them with their heart and with their soul as well. It's part of the process that is necessary to becoming a great artist yourself, but you may not be able to see it. Take a walk down Main Street today before the rain comes through Artisphere, and you will see so many different people who have learned a medium of their own self-expression. And most often we're not able to see the first, second, third, 100th draft of whatever it is that they finally created. But if they look closely, they certainly know all of those that they have learned from. All of the other masters who came before them that they have maybe tried to imitate or emulate even in their own work. They say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but it's also one of the ways that we start to learn. Just look at the children around us, and if you're a parent yourself, or even if you're a teacher and you have influence over children, a lot of times you will look at them and suddenly you will be stopped in your tracks, wide-eyed, when you recognize some element of their behavior and you know exactly who it came from. There is a daily prayer said silently in my daily life, usually in the morning, when our daughter Hattie will do something, and I'll know exactly where it came from, and I will say, "Dear Lord, please stop it and make her more like her mother than her father." But that's how we learn at first, isn't it? We imitate those who are around us, giving us nurture and care and passing on knowledge. But as we get older, we get a little more creative with it. We start to imitate things from our favorite TV show or our favorite movie. Just last night, Leah got our daughter Hattie into this long blue dress. It's obviously taken from the movie Frozen. And she said, Hattie, make ice like Queen Elsa. And she thought for a minute, and then she started moving her arms about and flailing, and as if she was throwing ice out for all to see. I remember myself not being too much older than her, maybe 3 or 4, and my mother had to forbid me from watching the old He-Man cartoons. Some of you will remember those. Some of you grew up with them. Apparently, my best friend and I were trying to too enthusiastically harness the power of Grayskull and use it to dominate each other. We get older and we start imitating our favorite sports figures. We like to stand in the batter's box just as they did, or approach the golf ball just as they do, or throw our arms into the air and back away as if we just sunk the 3-point shot that won the NBA Finals. And then eventually we'll start to emulate those who are around us, our mentors, those who have aspects of their life that we want in our life as well. It's hard to look like someone else and try to take what they've done and incorporate it into your life and put your own spin on it, your own interpretation of their life. Sometimes that's the job of the actor, isn't it? I don't know if you paid attention to the last award season that we just went through, as the Oscars and SAG Awards and the Emmys and the Golden Globes, all that stuff came through. I don't know if you paid attention or if you've seen the biopic of that legendary rock band Queen, where the actor Rami Malek plays that legendary frontman Freddie Mercury. He's got an iconic voice. He's got an iconic look. Rami Malek was talking on a British talk show about what it was like to try and be Freddie Mercury. He is not a method actor. He is not one who usually just does everything he can to embrace the character, but he wanted to try to embrace Freddie Mercury a little bit more than some of the other people he had played. So he had some false teeth made. Because if you remember Freddie Mercury, he had this massive overbite. And he never got it corrected because he had a 4-octave range as he sang. So Malek had these teeth made, and he'd walk around all day long with these teeth in, trying to talk like Freddie Mercury, trying to be a little bit more like him and the beautiful spirit that he was said to have had. And he told the interviewer that some days after he was done, as he started to take those teeth out, he thought, today it felt a little bit better to be Freddie Mercury than Rami Malek. Well, if we imitate people as we're learning, if actors imitate people on the stage and on the screen, if we imitate our favorite TV shows and our favorite athletes, and eventually we take those who are having influence over us as our mentors and we try to imitate the things that they do, that we could hopefully become successful in the same ways that they do, certainly there's an element of imitation that comes to play in the faithful life of the Christ follower. After all, it was the Apostle Paul who told the Ephesians that we must become imitators of Christ. He even told the Corinthians, if it's hard enough for you to think about what Christ might have been like, imitate me, because I'm trying to do everything I can to imitate Jesus Christ himself. We take the person who lived and died on our behalf and rose again, who showed us exactly what God wanted us to see life could be like. We take the aspects of it and we imitate it. We try to live it out in the best way that we possibly can. And even Paul understood that it's not just the grace that we need to see in Christ, it's his way also. And only by living in his way are we most faithfully able to express the faith that we have because of the grace that he has given us. James, the writer, said that faith without works is dead. I don't think he was talking about a works salvation. I think he was recognizing the cyclical aspect that comes with finding faith in Jesus Christ. Not only is it that when we live it out, we have the greatest expression of our faith, but also as you live it out, you become more faithful. Sometimes people hear something about Jesus and they start to believe in him and they start thinking that his way might be worth living. And as they start embracing the aspects of his way of life, and start living it for themselves, they find more faith. Even these days, there are people who don't necessarily believe any of the miraculous things that we know to be true about Jesus, but they are compelled by his way of life. And so they start to live it. and only by living aspects of forgiveness and love and welcome and charity and simplicity as he showed us, as we see in the Gospels, by living it out, they start to find faith in him. And the more faith people find, the more they want to live it out. And the more they want to live it out, the more faith they find. And round the faithful life goes. It's all about imitating Christ. And Peter knew that perhaps better than others. There he was in Lydda doing the best that he could to go around not only preaching, but to try to heal as well. He knew that the Spirit was at work in him. And while he's in Lydda, some of the faithful from Joppa come to him and they find him and they say, there is a woman who is so crucial to the life of our community. We love her. Her name is Tabitha. She has done great works of charity and caring for others. She has taken what is at her disposal. She's used her resources and she's lifted up this entire community. She got sick and she died. You have to come and see if you can do something. Now imagine being in Peter's shoes. Imagine having that request made of you and thinking, well, I know that the Spirit's moving in the world. I was there at Pentecost. I was there at the temple when I told the man to stand up and walk, and he did. I was there when the people had been healed and believed. Jesus is the one who raises the dead. I'll go and maybe, just maybe, I can offer some comfort to the grieving. So he goes and they take him up to the stairs where they have laid her out. He recognizes their grief and their mourning, their sense of urgency that something must be done. And he says, I need a moment. And he clears them from the room. He kneels down and he prays. And I can't help but think in that prayer is some element of, dear Lord, show me what Jesus would do in this moment and help me to have the strength and the power to do it. Perhaps it's in that moment that he remembered a time when they were walking along with Jesus. And a man named Jairus came to him and said, Jesus, you've got to come. My daughter is dying. By the time they got there, she died. Jesus sent everyone out. And he was there with the girl. And he said the words, Talitha cum. Little girl, get up. And I wonder if it's at that moment that Peter says, okay, let's give it a shot. Not Talitha, Tabitha, cum. And she opens her eyes and sees him and stands up. Now, I don't know if miracle stories do anything for your faith. They may not. Maybe it's simply the daily living or the recognition of Christ as Messiah that is what you shape around your life. But I think the writer of Acts, Luke himself, is trying to tell us that because of what Jesus did, because of the way he came and lived and died and rose again and ascended to heaven to sit at the right hand of God, the Spirit is at work in the ministry of resurrection. And all of those who are called in the name of Jesus Christ are also called to the ministry of resurrection. You may not be calling the dead back to life. You may not even be in the medical profession where you are offering physical healing, but make no mistake about it, the church is called to the ministry of resurrection, to go into the world and bring hope where there is nothing but despair, light where there is nothing but darkness, life where there is nothing but death. 2 churches ago where I was working, we had a relationship with a CBF missionary in India named Sam Bandela. His ministry looked very similar to that of Lena Lavanya, who our church has a relationship with. One of the aspects of his ministry was an orphanage that was filled mostly with young girls. Apparently, in that culture, wherever they happened to be in that section of India, there were girls who were born and their families did not see worth or value in them, and they would literally take them to the dumpster and simply leave them with the trash to be overcome by the elements or to be found by the wild animals or simply to die. And they would go and they would find these girls and they would take them and they would educate them and they would give them new life. They had a sewing ministry where they would take women who had been turned away from their families and they had no way to provide for themselves or their children except to sell their bodies. And they would teach them to sew. They'd give them a trade. They'd help them learn to make clothes so that they could go back to their village or wherever they were and they could have a living that would provide for them in a way that offered them dignity and agency and worth. I remember when Lena Lavanya was here and she was telling us about her ministries that looked very similar to that. And she was talking about going in to a camp that was filled with people suffering from leprosy. She went in and she took her Bible and she asked them what she could do for them and how she could pray for them and how she could serve them. And one of the men lying there on his bed simply said, "Show us Jesus. Just show us Jesus." And that is the ministry of our church, is it not? Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor says that we live in a secular age. That is to say that you can no longer assume that the people around us believe in God and Jesus in the same way that we do. There was a time when you could make that assumption about people, but you simply cannot make it anymore. We live in a secular age. They do not necessarily believe in the divine or the miraculous. And yet we're called to show Jesus anyway. And I would imagine that people who find Jesus most compelling are those who have seen the work of Jesus in the life of others. They've seen those who have been so taken by this man of Nazareth that they cannot help but live out his way of life. They preach it as much with their actions as they do their words. I heard a story recently. I have no idea if there's any historical accuracy to it or not. It may be apocryphal. It may have been something that somebody made up just as a good illustration, but I found it to be deeply profound, so I have to share it with you. The one I heard it from said that on the day that they hung Jesus on the cross, there was a group of his followers who had to get out of Jerusalem. They had followed Jesus as long as they could, and they could no longer live in a place that had put Jesus to death. So they gathered up what they could, and they ran for their life. They got as far away as they could until they found a place that had enough resources that they could build their own community. And they determined that in that community, they would do everything they could to keep the life and legacy of Jesus of Nazareth alive. So they lived out the love and simplicity and care and forgiveness that they had heard from Jesus and seen in Jesus. And when they had children, they taught their children to live that same way. They lived that way for 100 years, lifting each other up, lifting up those who were around them, until at last a group came upon them calling themselves missionaries. The missionaries who came and found this community of people were dumbfounded. It seemed as though they must have known about Jesus because they were living every single teaching that anybody could think of when it came to the life and ministry of Jesus. But they hardly said his name. These people were living out the way of Jesus, but they had never heard of his resurrection. The missionaries started telling the people about the good news of Jesus, that it wasn't the cross that kept him or the grave that kept him, but he lived and lives still. And there was great rejoicing. There was so much, in fact, that a great party started to break out. And as the missionaries were intermingling with those in the community and as they were enjoying the great celebration, one of them looked over outside of the camp and he noticed one of the elders crouched over. Wondering why she was so far off, he started walking towards her. And the closer he got, he started to recognize that she was crying. She was weeping. He went over to her and said, What are you crying about? This is a day of great rejoicing. Come and join the celebration. The woman who was crouched down stood up and looked the missionary straight in the eye and said, yes, for you it is a day of great rejoicing. For me it is a day of great sorrow. For 100 years we have pulled our community together and we have taught each other and taught our children to live the way of Jesus. And now with your good news, I'm worried. I'm extremely worried. I am worried that there will come a time when our children or our children's children will no longer live out the way of Jesus because of his radical ministry or the way that his testimony shapes the world. I'm afraid they're going to live it for selfish reasons, simply seeking their own salvation and forgetting everyone else around them. And with that, the woman walked and headed back into the village towards her hut. And the missionary was crouched on the ground, weeping uncontrollably. Missional theologian Darrell Guter says that we always have a tendency to preach a reduced gospel. We talk about personal salvation, but we don't talk enough about its works. We talk about what it means to us, but we don't talk enough about God's work to redeem the entire world. And yet we are called to live it out holistically so that the world around us can see it. Peter knew that probably better than others. In our gospel passage last week, we found Jesus and Peter sitting on the beach after Peter had come out of the boat and swam, recognizing the risen Christ again before him. They're sitting there, and Jesus looks at Peter and simply asks, Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, I love you. Then feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord. Then feed my lambs. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Jesus, you've got to know that I love you. Then feed my sheep. It's not just about the love that we profess of Jesus Christ with our mouths. We have to provide the shepherding and caring and raising ministry that this world so desperately needs. But Peter wasn't the only one who got that. Don't forget about Tabitha herself. She was revered. She was loved. She had lifted others up. She had used every resource at her disposal to make everyone around her better. She was a mother to that community. And they loved her for it. As I read this passage, I couldn't help but think about my Aunt Judy. Judy worked in the city office in Easley. I can't remember what job she had, but apparently if you needed something, you didn't call the mayor, you didn't call the city council, you called my Aunt Judy. And she would find a way to take care of it. She died of breast cancer some years ago. It had metastasized and moved throughout her body, and the fight was no more. But I remember being at the funeral home with the rest of the family there. And we think, normally as you have a visitation with your family and friends, it may take about an hour. We were there for 3 hours, standing and greeting strangers, not knowing who anyone outside of our family was, but they kept coming to us and talking about how much this woman who had lived out her faith in Christ had meant to them. It reminds me that just as was shared with our children, in a way that I would say, we all have our own Joppa, just as Tabitha had. We all have our own city government in Easley, just like Judy had. It's that place where the intersection of all the different aspects of your life finds you and calls you to offer healing and resurrection in the ways that you need and the world needs too. Offer it. Imitate Jesus in the way that the world needs. Amen.